Good morning. Welcome. Today we are with Jim DePasquale and Dr. Han Supan from Northern Arizona University. This is our University of Arizona Cooperative Extension Garden and Country Extension webinar series out of Gila County. And today we're going to be talking about opportunities and barriers for Arizona to supply wood fiber to South Korean renewable energy markets. A little bit about these webinars. I do them weekly on Thursdays at 11 in Arizona. They tend to be about 60 minutes, maybe more, maybe less, depending on questions and our presenter. I cover a variety of horticulture and natural resource topics relevant to the environmental conditions and residential concerns of Gila County, Arizona, and certainly anywhere else in the world that these may be of concern. Like to let you know that these webinars are recorded and they get posted to the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension YouTube channel. So if you go to that link right there, or just kind of Google University of Arizona Cooperative Extension Garden and Country, you'll find all these webinars, and we should be able to get this webinar up by next week. And the University of Arizona is an equal opportunity affirmative action institution. Our agenda today, thank you for everybody who's joined us during our login and lag time. My name is Chris Jones. I'm your moderator. I am the extension agent in Gila County for University of Arizona Cooperative Extension. Today's presentation is opportunities and barriers for Arizona to supply wood fiber to South Korean renewable energy markets. Our speaker is Jim DePasquale, and Jim's going to give a PowerPoint slide on his work on this, and then we'll open it up for a question and answer discussion with Jim and Dr. Han and myself. I'll help just moderate that. And I'll be providing, matter of fact, you already have the evaluation link in the chat box. And if you can do that evaluation for me, it just helps me with providing my impacts and what we're doing. Here is our speaker, Jim DePasquale. He is a Master of Science, just earned his degree. What he's going to be speaking about is his thesis project from Northern Arizona Graduate School, School of Forestry. Dr. Han is his graduate advisor. And so at that point, I am ready to stop the share here and hand it off to Jim. And great, are all set to go.
Thanks, Chris. Let me just share my screen here. Okay. So yeah, as Chris said, this is my master's research, along with Dr. Han at the NAU and the Ecological Restoration Institute, and Dr. Patrick Appold at the U.S. Forest Service. And the project is looking at opportunities and barriers for Arizona to supply wood fiber to the renewable energy markets in South Korea. Okay. So this research looks at again, the proposition of sending wood fiber across the Pacific to South Korea from Arizona. Looks at everything from wood specification requirements for the South Korean import markets, chain of custody requirements, as far as sending from Arizona to South Korea, and then transportation, logistics, and costs, as well as a SWOT analysis, that's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis on both the South Korean renewable energy market and biomass as a part of that, as well as the supply side here in Arizona. So we have both the supply and the demand. So biomass is a byproduct of restoration treatments here in Arizona, particularly on 4-5 restoration projects in northern Arizona, but a lack of market for this biomass has caused a decrease in the pace of restoration, but increased utilization of this woody biomass will lead to increased pace and scale of restoration. So a little bit of background on the supply here in Arizona. The Forest Restoration Initiative, or FORFRI, is a collaborative forest landscape restoration project. It covers parts of 4 national forests in Arizona: the Tonto, Coconino, Kaibab, and the Apache Sitgreaves. The overall FORFRI project goal is to reduce hazardous forest fuels across those forests. One of the operational goals is to mechanically treat or thin 50,000 acres per year. The byproduct of that mechanical treatment is small diameter logs and woody biomass that exceeds the market capacity here in this part of northern Arizona. Finding utilization outlets for the byproducts of forest restoration activities is increasingly important. And with planned increases in forest restoration, both here and across the West, finding those utilization outlets will become increasingly important and continue to grow. So what we have here is a couple of photographs on the left. These are photos taken of a log deck north of Flagstaff in the Mount Eldon area. This is from the summer of 2019. There was a helicopter logging operation. And that was part of the Flagstaff Watershed Protection Project. These log decks are quite massive, as you can see, and equally large slash piles behind those decks. Because of a lack of market for this wood, those decks and slash piles were just sitting in the forest, creating a fire hazard. And unfortunately, in 2019, the museum fire burned through some of this area just north of Flagstaff again. On the right side, these are before and after photos of a log deck from that helicopter logging operation. And as you can see, the log deck completely burned up, wasting a resource. And part of that is because we don't have a market, we don't have the demand for that wood in the western part of FORFRI, in that part of northern Arizona. So we have all this wood, we have the supply, but where's the demand? One place that has the demand for woody biomass is the South Korean renewable energy market. Renewable energy policy in South Korea began with a feed-in tariff program, which was guarantees a price for woody biomass used in electricity production that is above the market rates. That was a successful policy. However, South Korea changed the government-supported policy to a renewable portfolio standard, which is currently in place today. And what the renewable portfolio standards require is that electricity producers produce a certain percentage of their electricity production from renewable sources, including biomass. And so South Korean government has set mandates for offsetting coal and energy production with renewable fuel sources. And those mandates parallel similar policies implemented in the European Union, which is now a significant export market for wood heating pellets manufactured in the Southeast United States. So South Korean market demand for biomass as a renewable fuel source is growing. The anticipated demand for wood fiber exceeds the capacity of South Korea's natural resources to supply that raw material in a sustainable way. And so that biomass needs to be imported to South Korea for these renewable energy markets. The market price of fuel wood pellets and other biomass fuels in South Korea can be more than double the price here in the US because of the support through these government policies. If we take a look at the production of electricity using biomass in South Korea, from 2014 to 2019, we saw a steady increase in that production. This is from research by Bay in 2019. And the expectation is that through 2022, that the production of electricity from biomass will continue to increase sharply. Looking at other demand in South Korea, in 2019, there was consumption of 2.9 million metric tons of biomass in the electricity production market. And Those numbers are expected to more than double by 2022 to 6.6 million metric tons. So in 2019, the Ecological Restoration Institute at NAU conducted a chip and ship pilot project that sent wood chips from Camp Navajo, just west of Flagstaff, to the port of Long Beach, and then via marine transport to South Korea. This was a test project to outline the logistics, costs, and to see if the project was feasible. For that project, logs from restoration treatments in the Chimney Springs area, north of Flagstaff, were taken to Camp Navajo on Department of Defense land, again, west of Flagstaff. Those logs were chipped and loaded into these shipping containers, and then loaded on rail transportation to the port of Long Beach, and again, across the Pacific to South Korea. This project showed that logistically it was possible, and helped us understand what would be required for this transportation. So this project that I worked on for my graduate research is a continuation of that ERI chip and ship project. And the scope included these four main objectives, which were to ascertain the specifications of wood fiber that's required in renewable energy markets in South Korea, and determine what chain of custody requirements are indeed needed for shipments or imports to South Korea, and then identify transportation costs with moving wood fiber from northern Arizona to the port of Long Beach in California, an extension of that ERI chip and ship project. And finally, the crux of the research is performing this SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis of the wood fiber market in South Korea, as well as the supply in northern Arizona. So the first one, the ascertaining the desirable specifications of wood fiber in South Korea. The National Forest Research Institute provides specifications and quality standards for wood product imports. They outline fuel wood pellet specifications, wood chip, and other wood fiber product specifications, including biochar and charcoal. But we focused the research on fuel wood pellets and wood chips in particular, because those are the most desirable at this time in the renewable energy markets in South Korea. Right here is a graphic, again, from the National Forest Research Institute in South Korea that shows fuel wood chip specifications that are the minimum standards required for import into South Korea. On the right side, you have wood chip sizes, and on the left side, you have more detailed information about specific content of the fuel wood chips. And there's two specific categories. The top fuel wood chips in category 1 would require a moisture content under 25. In category 2 would require under 35%. From talking with buyers in South Korea, the size of the wood chip and the moisture content were the most important characteristics. I'd like to point out that this also shows hogwood fuel, which is a rougher, dirtier chip. And there are specifications there, but in the renewable energy production market in South Korea, hog fuel is not something that producers want. These specifications are applied to all foreign imported wood fiber from all regions of the world. Looking at the chain of custody requirements, the USDA APHIS, or Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, requires both phytosanitary certificates and import permits. Research on the chain of custody requirements identified that the USDA monitors international trade of animal and plant products, including forest biomass products. Those phytosanitary standards provide safe and predictable trade system of which the US participates, and also promotes safe and sustainable trade, as well as protection from introducing exotic invasive species. specifications for pine wood chips, again, mandate both the phytosanitary certificate and the import permit, or imports will be refused. Interesting to note that the South Korean biomass market does not require a third-party sustainability forest certification, which lowers the hurdle for entry into this market, which is a good thing. The exporter has all of the responsibility to meet the import requirements outlined by these chain of custody documents. Again, pine wood shavings require that phytosanitary certificate. Wood shavings require additionally inoculation treatments via heat or chemical fumigation programs. The third objective looked at identifying costs associated with the transportation of wood fiber from northern Arizona to the Port of Long Beach. Again, this is a continuation of the ERI chip and ship pilot study. Transportation costs are one of the most significant expenses in the wood procurement process. Transportation, logistics, and costs are a key component in the export of wood fiber to South Korea. As part of this project, many transportation cost variables exist, and accurately defining those costs can be difficult. So in this project, transportation methods were ranked based on results of pilot projects as well as input from subject matter experts. And based on those results, we have identified that direct loading of wood chips into containers at a railhead will likely be the least expensive transportation option. However, functioning railhead capacity in northern Arizona is limited at this time. Railheads do exist in northern Arizona, but most require some significant infrastructure upgrades in order to transport wood chips to the Port of Long Beach on an ongoing full-scale basis. For example, the ERI chip and ship pilot study from 2019 used the rail spur at the Camp Navajo Department of Defense land. That spur would need significant upgrades to be used on a full-time basis for this proposition. That would include extending the track 8,000 feet and adding 2 electronic switches. Those infrastructure upgrades would come at a cost of approximately $5 million. Transporting biomass by tractor trailer followed by rail car is the best and only short-term option. Transporting biomass to Phoenix by tractor trailer followed by loading on rail cars would be the best near-term solution. Some information from the chip and ship study identified the stump to container costs, which is from the forest to the rail cars, loaded onto the rail cars, include everything from log procurement, loading, trucking, decking, and again, chipping into those shipping containers. They identified on a green ton basis, anywhere from a low of $33 to a high of $52. And these costs, again, do not include those infrastructure improvements or site rental or rail operations. It should be noted that shipping from Long Beach to a port in South Korea on a green ton basis can be anywhere from $20 to $25, just as a reference. Further looking at some of these railroad transportation costs, at a price of $40 per ton, you can see across the right, the costs, the shipping cost per container for rail transportation would need to be under $1,000 in order to make this an economically feasible solution. The cost of rail transportation would need to be negotiated with BNSF, and those prices or those costs are proprietary and are not known at this time. But again, this gives you a scale of what might be necessary in order to make it an economically viable transportation option. So moving into the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis, again, of both the South Korean market and the Arizona supply. Doing this type of SWOT analysis helps to develop a full awareness of all of the factors that might impact a potential decision on this proposition. The idea being that strengths and opportunities could be leveraged and weaknesses and threats overcome. The purpose of any SWOT analysis is to identify typically existing internal strengths and weaknesses and external opportunities and threats. Again, strengths can be leveraged, weaknesses mitigated, opportunities exploited, and threats avoided. So this graphic is every one of the SWOT factors that we identified in this research. And each one of the quadrants is a different one of the SWOT categories: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The sizes of the bubbles represent the size of the strategic impact to this business proposition. I'm going to get into more detail explaining how this specifically works, but suffice it to say that this is a diagram that represents every factor that's analyzed and then scored, and what that looks graphically represented. So the SWOT factor scoring, they were evaluated and scored on a relative scale. Expert evaluation group assessed and scored each factor on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the greatest. A second score, a weighting factor, was assigned based on the relative importance to this business proposition. And again, they were scaled from 1 to 10, with 10 being the greatest. And then finally, a strategic impact score was calculated by multiplying those two ratings together. So looking at the strengths SWOT factor quadrant, and then looking on the left side is more detail of the specific, is detail on the specific scoring. And so again, you have the factor score from 1 to 10, and then you have the relative importance scaled from 1 to 10, and then a strategic impact. And that strategic impact score is represented by the size of the bubble or circle in the graphic. As you can see, by the two largest bubbles are the large market and the high price. South Korean electricity market is one of the top markets in the world. It's a top 10 electricity consumer. South Korea is a country of approximately 50 million people and geographically the size of Arizona. Because of government support of these renewable energy policies, the price of woody biomass in South Korea can be more than double the price here in the US. Again, government support through the renewable portfolio standards requires a percentage of electricity to be produced from renewable sources. That percentage has been increasing and is currently at 10%. And South Korea imports nearly 75% of the biomass that is used in electricity production, meaning that only 25% of that biomass is domestic. That market consumes 6 million metric tons of biomass per year. Some of the other strengths include new production of dedicated biomass facilities. That will be those dedicated biomass plants will guarantee a demand into the future. Advanced biomass technology in those dedicated plants can produce the electricity from biomass more efficiently. Again, low quality and sustainability hurdles for entry into the market, because third-party forest sustainability certification is not required. Entry into the marketplace is a low hurdle. If we move on to the weaknesses, again, looking at some of the larger bubbles, the greatest weakness is that the prices are volatile. There's a single market and a lack of liquidity. So in other words, there are very few suppliers and customers in the marketplace. And so flexibility is limited, and therefore volatile swings in prices can occur. One way to mitigate that would be to have guaranteed contracts. A second weakness is what happens after RPS. The Renewable Portfolio Standards Policy is currently expected to end in 2024. Beyond that, it's uncertain what kind of renewable energy policies South Korean government will have. It's expected that there will be continued government support for renewable electricity production. Another potential weakness is relying specifically on national forests for wood supply here in Arizona, because most of the forest land in Arizona is national forest land rather than state and private. There's anything that would impact the national forest supply could greatly impact this proposition. Again, one way to mitigate that would be to get supply from a secondary or additional source. And then limited transportation partners are a potential weakness. Transportation via rail will have a limited partner, and then negotiation on price may be a weakness. Additionally, there's a handful of smaller weaknesses, and they include things like the fact that Vietnam currently has an oversupply of fuel wood pellets that could potentially flood the South Korean market and reduce the price. Additionally, South Korea is favoring domestic biomass with higher renewable energy credits as part of the government policy. However, as I stated in this, a moment ago in the strengths, because of the lack of resource in South Korea, nearly 75% of the biomass used in energy production is being imported and will continue to be need to be imported, as well as any future growth. One additional weakness is noted that northern Arizona ponderosa pine has a high initial moisture content, although this again can be mitigated by simply allowing logs to dry out, or by creating the wood chips and allowing them to dry out as well before transport. Moving on to some of the opportunities. One of the greatest is the opportunity for long-term strategic partners. Currently, there are a few long-term agreements in this biomass renewable energy market in South Korea, but there is an opportunity to have long-term contracts that would guarantee wood fiber prices, as well as guarantee long-term supply contracts on the supply side. Second opportunity is the Japanese market. Similar to South Korea, Japan is a large electricity consumer, again, one of the top 10 in the world. And the Japanese government is supporting renewable energy production through feed-in tariff policy, which is guaranteeing prices above market rate for wood fiber used in renewable energy production. Therefore, Japan is paying a premium price, again, more than double the price here in the US. Some of the other opportunities include the fact that Vietnam is currently holding 60% of the import market into South Korea. There is a belief that Vietnam could be sustainably tapped as far as supplying that resource at this capacity, and that additional imports to South Korea would need to come from another source, potentially Arizona. There's also the opportunity that wood fiber from Arizona could be of better quality and sustainability than provided from Vietnam and Malaysia. Some of those other smaller opportunities include the fact that South Korea is phasing out solid recovered fuel as a part of the renewable energy policies. That solid recovered fuel is waste that's used to burn along with coal to produce electricity. By phasing that out, there's an opportunity for biomass to slide in and take that place because it can, in the same way, be co-fired in co-firing plants along with coal to produce electricity. And then there's also an opportunity for a large pellet maker, someone like Pinnacle, to open a facility in the Southwest that would add value to the wood product before it was transported and make the whole proposition even more cost effective. Moving on to the threats. So some of the larger ones is the lack of long-term agreements. So without guaranteed prices and supply, this proposition could be difficult or risky without mitigation. And then there's also regulatory uncertainty. Changes in the renewable energy policy in South Korea could impact this proposition. There's also potential threats for some changes in policy that would include things like requiring a third-party sustainability certification, which could be difficult to obtain for wood fiber pulled from national forests in the United States, because the forests in the United States are managed for multiple uses and not specifically for timber only. Changes in phytosanitary requirements could significantly impact the costs. Several years ago, we saw phytosanitary requirements between the US and Mexico change, where requiring treatment or phytosanitation on the US side at the cost of the exporter. A similar change with South Korea could significantly increase the costs to this proposition. And another significant but unlikely factor would be the disruption of supply on the national forests. In the fall of 2019, we saw federal injunctions across the national forests of New Mexico and some in Arizona, including the Tonto, which is part of forest that required all forest activity to be stopped because of some things around the Mexican spotted owl habitat. Similar federal injunction halting activity on national forests, specifically on the other 4 or 5 forests, could be a significant disruption to supply. Again, with limited state and private forest land in Arizona, an alternate resource would be needed. Some of the additional threats that were ranked smaller include the opportunity for other renewable fuel sources to take share from the biomass energy production. The renewable portfolio standards require a certain percentage of electricity be produced from renewable sources, but they don't specify which renewable sources would be required. Therefore, other sources like wind or solar could potentially take a larger share of that market. Those two in particular have been limited by battery technology to date, and increases in that technology would allow potentially more production from those sources. Some of the other threats include new domestic competition for wood supply in Arizona. There is a possibility that forest products industries could grow in specifically the western part of forestry in northern Arizona. That domestic demand would certainly be a threat to supplying wood fiber to South Korea. And then there's the possibility that another state could step in with a similar chipping and shipping approach. California, for example, could potentially do the same proposition, and depending on location, possibly at a lower price. And then there's some environmental threats that should be considered, things like bark beetle outbreak that could significantly impact ponderosa pine. And of course, the ever-present threat for severe wildfires that could consume the supply resource here in Arizona. So looking again at this graphic of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, again with the factor score on the y-axis and the relative importance on the x-axis, the larger bubbles being the most significantly impactful to the proposition. And the strengths, again, large market in South Korea, the price being more than double for wood fiber in South Korea than it can be in the US. Weaknesses, most specifically the volatile prices. Without guaranteed contracts, the prices can swing significantly. So what can we do about that? One of the opportunities is to get long-term strategic partners, both on the demand side from producers in South Korea, as well as on the supply side, and then additionally transportation partners, right? Without those agreements and those strong partnerships, that'll make this a possibility. And then the biggest threats are the lack of long-term agreements. Without that, investment in this proposition would be difficult. And then a significant threat is to the disruption of supply on the national forest. Relying on a single source for wood fiber supply would need to be mitigated with a secondary source. So in total, South Korean renewable energy market is young and immature, but it's expanding because of the government support. Prices can be more than double the price on a per ton basis as they are here in the US. Market size, government policy support, and future growth potential make shipping wood fiber from Arizona to South Korea an attractive proposition. However, market stability or instability and the insecurity of South Korean renewable policy makes investment a risk without proper mitigation strategies. So in total, good potential exists and opportunity for Arizona to supply wood fiber to South Korean renewable energy markets with the understanding of the current limitations to infrastructure in northern Arizona today. And again, with increased utilization, we can have increased pace and scale of restoration. I'd like to acknowledge the USDA Federal State Marketing Improvement Program for funding on this project, as well as Dr. O from the Korean Forest Service and Chris Jones from U of A Cooperative Extension. I'd also like to thank and introduce Dr. Han Supan, Director at the Ecological Restoration Institute, and as well as my advisor on this project. He is heavily involved in this project, as well as the ERI Chip and Ship project and an additional related project that's ongoing today. And Dr. Han will be available for questions as well. So welcome, Han.
Thank you. Chris, you're on mute.
That would be a good thing to get me off of mute, wouldn't it? I was just congratulating Jim on his master's degree, his thesis. I was able to participate in his defense, and just being able to hear it again with his presentation, really important research, and happy to be able to have this opportunity to share in it. My colleague, well, Patrick Rappolt's here. Patrick was with the University of Arizona. He was able to get this grant with Han. When he joined the Forest Service, gave me the opportunity to participate in this. So very good. So at this time, we're going to open it up for our question and answer. And I've got a few things in the chat box. That's a great place to put your questions and answers. And we got a group here that's not too big. I think something I'd like to do is go ahead and just allow you to participate. Whoa, hold up here. With questions. And so Patrick mentioned something early on about COVID-19 having had an impact. So Patrick, if you don't mind, I'm going to put you on the allow to talk, because it seems like you've had a lot to do with this as well, if you want to participate with that question.
Sure. So, what's affecting companies right now in the Midwest and Northeast where I live is mostly the mud season. And so, a lot of the export markets are kind of slowing down overseas right now for logs and chips. And so it's just a matter of which country comes back the quickest and the fastest from the COVID pandemic. And so I think, maybe the Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico will be resilient and be able to help supply some of these markets.
Good.
I guess my other question is, if South Korean policies do change, do you think the Japanese market is big enough to be a substitute and be attractive enough for U.S. businesses to start shipping from the Southwest to Japan?
It's a good question. So, industry analyst research that I've seen project that the Japanese market could be somewhere in the 20 to 30 million metric tons of biomass consumption by 2030. That's significantly more than what's being consumed in South Korea right now and the expectations for the future. The costs and logistics of that transportation would be very similar to those same things for South Korea. So, and instead of marine transport to a port in South Korea, that same marine transport to a port in Japan would be similar as far as logistics and costs. So that is a potential opportunity for sure.
Now, what if the country of South Korea has enough infrastructure in place to actually produce pellets, wood heating pellets to supply Japan? Is that another possible scenario, or is that infrastructure still being developed within South Korea?
Yeah, I can answer that question actually, since I've been communicating pretty closely with the Korean company, JA International. So my understanding is that that company, JA International, who is was the partner of our chip and ship project, that's actually their business plan, because their manufacturing facility is right next to the ocean, which is very close to Japan. They are going to be able to effectively capitalize the marketing opportunity in Japan, actually with the even better price than what they can sell within the South Korea. So they are thinking to import wood chips from the United States and making wood pellet in their facility, and then the shipping the wood pellets to Japan. And so with that kind of business plan, they are looking for over 500,000 tons every year over the next 20 years, starting in January 2023. That's what I've been hearing. So I think that idea is really already in place, and that they are looking for more supply, more dependable supply, consistent supply from United States.
Good conversation on that. Okay, Shauna has a question. What other markets currently exist or have existed in Arizona for this wood in the past?
Go ahead, Jim.
I was just going to say that it's a good question. So in parts of eastern Arizona, there's a good market for the bioproducts, this restoration activity. Some of the smaller diameter wood is going to smaller mills, but they also have bioenergy production facility in Snowflake that can consume some of this excess biomass because of the length of transportation from places around Flagstaff to Snowflake. The cost would be prohibitive from sending it there. So there used to exist more forest product industry in the western part of Fort-Fry, but that doesn't exist today. But there is an opportunity for that market to come back, and I think that there's some ideas for that potentially to happen in the future.
Yeah, that is a good comment, good answer right there. But we have some challenges here in the Western Arizona. At Western Arizona, we have a small diameter material really does not have a really good market for those small diameter wood. So some markets we see for the wood produced in Western Arizona is traveling down to Phoenix area to make the mulch for landscaping. That's the one product they are making. Another one is the Patrick can chip in this one. He knows, he's more familiar with this idea about making some wood pellet, using the wood, but that need to be treated and that can be exported to markets in Mexico. Patrick, do you see any other markets for small diameter wood in Arizona?
No, I mean, the main problem is the lumber grades you yield from the small diameter ponderosa pine. It's typically just 3 common and better. And so the 3 common, it's very low value. And so your ideal ponderosa pine lumber markets just don't exist for that small diameter material. So it's definitely tough to come by. There is some decent post and pole manufacturers in Eastern Arizona. And so that's also a good market. It's just a matter of consistent demand. Right now, with the COVID pandemic, everybody's at home trying to do home renovations. So I imagine the post and pole market's pretty decent. It's just maintaining that supplies and maintaining market value.
Very good. Okay, Chester, you have some questions here. If you don't mind, I'm going to allow you to ask that question, and just introduce yourself, and we'll let you ask those questions of us.
Okay, yeah, thank you. My name is Chester Gunn. It's hard to say what I am. I'm a lot of different things, but we have an interest in, wood fiber, and we've actually on the technology side, but I was just curious as to how many green tons are you looking at harvesting a year out of Northern Arizona?
I've been communicating with the Forest Service for Fry. Based on their the contract they issued, I think my understanding, they have about 1.5 million ton of the wood can be produced out of their restoration treatment. Out of that, I think maybe close to billion ton can be it can be consumed within Arizona. But we do have an excess amount of more than 500,000 ton of wood still hasn't found any market yet.
Okay. Now, what was my other question? Has there been any interest from Korea as far as investing in these projects in Arizona? And my final question, which you may be able to answer as well, is these chips, once they get to Korea, are they stored covered, or are they at open storage? And is moisture a factor?
Yeah, I can also answer the question. So the company we've been working for that chip and ship, they are very, very interested in making investment of the building a pellet plant, wood pellet plant here in Northern Arizona, because of the high cost of transportation. So they can make a wood pellet in South Korea, but they once this business partnership in place and become successful and stabilized, they like to rather have a building of the wood pellet manufacturing facility here in Northern Arizona, so that they can import wood pellet more sustainable or consistently from Arizona. That's their kind of a next chapter of their business plan. And your second question about the wood chips storage in South Korea, I went to their site. I saw their chips was open, uncovered, the storage facility they have. And it's been my experience that when they're looking for wood chips, ideally 25% or less. But they seem a little more open to the idea, but it can go up to 30%, around 30% as well. And apparently, the drier the better, that's for sure. But it seems it's not critical for them to have some the wet materials.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Patrick, Jim, anything to add for Chester? Chester,
I don't
thanks
have
for your
anything.
questions. And Patrick, you brought up something about policy. Why don't we go ahead and have that conversation with Con and Jim?
Yeah. My understanding is that the policies is as Jim mentioned that it's always some of the risk. So as Jim mentioned, that the risk that the policy can be changed overnight. So, but that's not necessarily unique in South Korea. It's the same risk for everywhere. But my understanding is that the change of the policy, it's been becoming a lot more favorable for importing the wood chips from outside the country. This year, South Korea government, they declare that the carbon neutral 0% emission of carbon emission by 2050. So they are have a very aggressive planning to close their coal-powered plant over time. And with the increase of the more power production from renewable energy, they're also reducing the capacity of the nuclear power as well. So they are really struggling with how we're gonna be able to fill the energy demand with the reduction of the power production from coal and nuclear power. So with that kind of idea, they would anticipate that they expect that a lot more biomass as well as the solar and wind is needed over many years, over time. So that's what's happening this year in South Korea, as far as the policy.
Jim, Patrick, that's okay? All right. Please feel free to ask any other questions. Add that to the chat box for me. I do have a question for Jim. I'm going to move the, how can I get my hands on here? Just want to make sure I got people aware of the evaluation. Add that in there one more time so you can go on to that link and let us know how we're doing. There we go. So Jim, in your presentation, I was looking at your threats analysis, and the key or largest analysis threat is disruption of fuel supply from the national forest, right? And I would assume that that was probably political, changes in administrations, and it being available. Ranked lower were some of the forest health issues with bark beetle outbreaks and wildfires. And as we're experiencing these wildfires throughout the West this year in California for the past several years, I would wonder if we'd be getting a social demand, if not an economic demand. It's like, what can we do about these wildfires? What can we do about this smoke? People are experiencing smoke in the cities now. And so I just thought that, wildfires was a lower threat that I guess is overlapping. It's gonna be another reason you'd have a disruption in the supply. But if society is like, what can we do about this smoke? Well, we could have biomass energy. It could be a solution. So just some comments on that, please.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Chris. So as far as the impact to the supply from a disruption on national forests, that's rated as a significant impact because one federal injunction could stop activity across the entirety of the forests on forefront. Whereas a wildfire, even the largest wildfires, aren't going to impact the entirety of that area. But as far as the social aspect, that's an interesting thing as well because people are becoming more involved. There's more social pressure to get this restoration work done. I mentioned that Flagstaff Watershed Protection Project towards the beginning to show some of those photos, and the funds for that project actually came from the citizens of Flagstaff imposing a tax on themselves to the tune of $10 million to be used specifically for treatment of the forest to prevent catastrophic fires around Flagstaff. So that's an example where, people are talking with their dollars about what they want done and the speed with which they want it done. So, there is a potential that social pressure could be used to increase the pace of this restoration. But again, without the utilization markets for the wood fiber, we'll be stuck in the same kind of situation where we have log decks in the forests that, we thin acres, but we just stack the wood and it's still sitting out there with no place to go. So finding those utilization outlets is still going to be an important key.
Anything to add to that, Han?
Yeah, I think that the Jim answered all that. The good question that they provided good answers, good thoughts, share the good thoughts. But I just want to share some one of the point that Jim made about the risk. So the wildfire and insect outbreaks can can cause some of the supply issue. So that's been the big concern when we're talking about this kind of business. So that's something I like that Jim made at that point. So
yeah. Okay. Well, we are getting close to the noon hour. If we've got a few more questions, let us know. I don't think I have a setting to raise your hand. So just indicating in the chat box, that'd be good. If I don't get something very soon here, I'm going to bring up the closing slides. All right, there's Jim, clean shaven, very good. And just to close this down, please complete that webinar evaluation. It's in the chat box. It's brief, takes about a minute, and just helps to give me some information on how I'm doing. And thank you for the Q&A discussion we've had with Jim and Han and Chris and Patrick. So thank you. We'll be going on a bit of a Christmas holiday break here soon. So our next webinar will be Thursday, January 14. And we're going to talk about rabies. So, from wood to rabies, so wildlife types of things. So anyway, got a great opportunity with Geraldine Sponseller. She's a veterinarian, and we'll be talking about that. So thank you, everybody, for your time today. I hope you all enjoy your holidays. And thank you, Jim. Thank you, Han. I'm going to hit stop recording now, and we are done.